Are the Oklahoma Sooners making a mistake on the recruiting trail?
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Man, I missed y'all. It's so good to be back. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase over at Game Time. He's Jay Smith of Unfair Sports. I'm John Williams of Sooners Wire at USA Today Sports. And on today's show, we're going to discuss the big contracts that are being handed out on the recruiting trail. Is Oklahoma going to go into a lot of these games this year as the underdog? It might seem so. We got some betting lines to discuss in the second segment. But first, the Oklahoma Sooners lost out on another in-state recruit. Braden Presley committed to the Oklahoma State Cowboys, making another in-state prospect that chose the Cowboys over Oklahoma, in addition to the Taj Overton piece. We know that the Caden Jones thing wasn't going Oklahoma's direction for a long time. And there's a lot of reasons why this could all be going down, Jay. But first, just talk about Oklahoma's pursuit of in-state prospects. I know you're the chief conductor on the Oklahoma prep agenda train. So let me let you lead this off. What's going on with Oklahoma's in-state recruiting, Jay?
It doesn't seem like Oklahoma's really made that fully a priority since Jim Nagy and this new staff have come in. Now, granted, it doesn't mean that they're not going to go after some of these players, but I think there's a limit to what they're willing to do as far as the pursuit goes, in which there's something that we're seeing, right? So Jim Nagy went on KTUL's triple option podcast up in the Tulsa area, and he's kind of gave like a little bit of an insight about how they're working things in the background when it comes to recruiting. And one of the things that Nagy pointed out was they have their own ranking list, and then they take the 5-star ranking list or the ranking list of the players that the recruiting sites do. And then in OV season, they kind of compare to see what players that not only that they're pursuing and they get to get OVs for, but who they should continue to go after. And if things don't line up the way that they like, they're trying to find more value out there on top of the players that they're going to try to win. I think the one thing that a lot of fans missed out on in that conversation was they took it as Jim Nagy saying that they're only going after value. So if there's a really good player, they're going to be like, nah, we're going to find somebody that's not rated as high, but should be as talented, when that's not what he was basically saying. And so when it comes to this OK prep agenda that, you know, as you said, I am the conductor of said train, I'm big on us getting the local in-state talent. Only if the in-state talent feels like talent that we should actually pursue and go after. It doesn't sound like this regime felt like the extra push was necessary here because of who they're in on and other players. So if there's anything, John, I have to say to wrap it up is we're not going to know the impact of Jim Nagy, Lake Dawson, Taylor Red, or any of them probably for another 2 years when we see how their evaluations work with some of the players and how those players end up performing.
I will say that if by year 3 or 4 of the 2026 recruiting class's time on campus, that's going to be when we decide how effective this recruiting strategy was. Because you look at the 2022 class, they slowly started to break out over the last year and a half. I mean, the 2024 season, a little bit 2023 when you got Kip Lewis, over the second half of that year, but it's really 2024 is when that class broke out. They were on campus 3 years, and then 2025, they're going to be the guys leading the way for this program. But man, it feels weird not having any Oklahoma kids in this recruiting class. Does that mean that they'll never take Oklahoma kids? Not necessarily. It just, when you're an Oklahoma kid, Oklahoma football is king, right? They've been the preeminent program in this state. A lot of these kids grow up Oklahoma fans. You talk about the national championship winning team. How many Oklahoma kids were on that team? There were quite a few. kids grow up with that dream of playing for Oklahoma, playing at Oklahoma, helping Oklahoma win football games. How much does that matter in today's college football? I don't know. When you're looking for the best opportunity to play, you're looking for the best opportunity in name, image, and likeness. You're looking for the best situation with a position coach or a coaching staff. There are so many factors that go into it that your favorite team isn't as much of a priority as it might have been 20, 30, 40 years ago. 40 years ago, if you were a top player in the state of Oklahoma and you were an Oklahoma fan and Oklahoma was recruiting you, you were going to Oklahoma. But now there's so many other factors that go into it. But to not have any Oklahoma kids, it's quite a statement and it's a bold strategy. And we'll see if it pays off. But at the same time, and I'm going to argue with myself here, recruiting Oklahoma kids hasn't won them a national championship in 25 years.
That's the thing to take in consideration, too. It's how much winning have you done in going with that strategy? And not saying that, okay, kids can't get you a national championship. We've seen them go to other schools and help win national championships, right? You saw Josh Jacobs do that coming from McLean High School going to Alabama and, being the running back that ran down our throat in the playoffs. So it can be done.
And this is more to say, like, okay, you don't like Jim Nagy's strategy. Okay, and listen, I might not be a fan of not taking any Oklahoma kids. At the same time, the strategy that Bob Stoops had, Lincoln Riley had, Brent Venables hasn't yielded you a national championship yet. So why not try something different?
Yeah, and that's what he's looking for. He's looking for players that's going to give you not only NFL traits, that's one that's going to help you win quickly. I think the only thing that I've pushed back or thought about when it came to the NFL traits piece is that a lot of the players that have blossomed in the NFL usually were later bloomers when they weren't rated very high. They were ones that bloomed junior, senior year of college. I mean, Khalil Mack's probably one of your better examples of that, a player that just got a chance to go into the league and dominate, and most of his traits didn't show until later in his college career. If it would have been earlier, he would have transferred out of Buffalo and went to a bigger school. So some of those things that do happen. So, but you got to also find the players when it comes to work ethic. You don't know how these kids are going to react to not only getting paid, but actually just practicing or performing at the collegiate level. That's where the biggest struggle to me comes in when it comes to trying to find and evaluate talent. That's why we have 3 different rating systems, because not one of them can be the de facto one that tells you everything. Plus, all of them do it differently. Like 247s, they place them in order based upon where they think they'll end up getting drafted. Not really if they're better than someone else, but where they think they would get drafted if that class went all together. So it's a completely different setup and thought process. For Oklahoma, though, we've got to give Nagy some time to do what he does. We've got to give him the opportunity to actually go out there and make a mistake here and there and but still go find talent. We've already seen the staff be able to do it with finding the good players that other schools are trying to pay and take off our lap as far as 3 and 4 stars go. We've seen it. We've already seen the Jay Jackson get, massive offers. R. Mason Thomas getting offers. You've seen this from those players. And you've seen them stick around and want to play. I mean, heck, you saw the North Sellers get a massive offer there at Syracuse. Schools are going to come after your players, which is a good thing. That means you're doing something right. For Oklahoma, though, we've got to give Nagy the time and see how this works out. I think that the OK Prep agenda will probably increase over the next couple of years as he continues his evaluation process. Just this year, it didn't feel like there was anybody that you just had to have.
Well, and again, I'm going to bring it back to this. There are so many factors that go into a kid's decision for why they choose the school. It's not simply Oklahoma didn't want him enough. It could very well have been they just like the situation at Oklahoma State better. Mm-hmm. And listen, that can be a true discussion. It's okay. And you think about a wide receiver like Mason James going up to Washington. He's from Norman North. Like, there were a lot of factors in play there, and the quarterback situation that changed, the wide receiver recruiting that changed, a lot changed over the last 6-8 months that changed that dynamic. And that's just the way it goes. I imagine this isn't going to be a forever thing. I think this is going to be one of those one-off years, and I understand everybody's antsy and they want Oklahoma to get back to winning. What happens in 2025 is going to have something to do with the 2026 recruiting class, but the 2026 recruiting class isn't helping you win this year. So let's have a little patience. Let's see if it works. I mean, the guy's been here, 5 months maybe? And a lot of people are already trying to run him out the door because they don't have enough blue chips. They don't have enough star talent. There's not enough in-state recruits for whatever reason. You got to see if it's going to work. Rarely do you see general managers in any sport fired after 1 year. So give it time, give it a little patience. The head coaching situation might be different. The GM's going to be here for a bit.
I mean, even add to that though, where do you think Jaydn Ott came from?
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah. I was having this discussion with somebody on social media that Jim Nagy in his short time here added Jaydn Ott, added a starting center in Jake Michaela, added a potential rotational / starting wide receiver in Jermichael Carter in just a few months. So anyway, that's a long discussion. It's a big, big, big strategy. It's bold. We'll see if it works out. Hopefully it does for Oklahoma, but we got to let time be the teller of how this is going to work. Anyway, I'm out of sorts, guys. It's been a week. I've been off. I haven't recorded. I'm completely out of sorts, but we're going to get back in the swing of things. Oklahoma, the underdog in the 2025 season. Let's discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. And today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands. That's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worrying out of buying. Game Time is the official ticketing partner of Locked On Major League Baseball, making it easy to browse the app for an exciting upcoming MLB game. Whether you're going to the Texas Rangers or the St. Louis Cardinals, Kansas City Royals, Game Time has got you covered. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Jay, FanDuel released some lines for some Oklahoma games, and they're not super high on the Sooners.
The way it looks, in some capacities, no. In others, we did see some kind of favorites. The ref sports, KREF posted a tweet from FanDuel, our partner here, and there's 4 lines that they dropped for Oklahoma so far. You've got the OU Michigan game, Oklahoma Texas, Oklahoma Alabama, and Oklahoma versus Missouri. Now, John, as you said, underdogs here. It appears that the Sooners are considered big dogs in the Red River Shootout at 10.5 to open. Plus 10.5, that is. That means the Sooners are dogs. And they're plus 12.5 dogs at Alabama. Now, granted, we were also very big dogs at home against Alabama when we played them last season, and we saw how that turned out. But in retro, I think this is actually a pretty big deal, John. We are 2.5-point favorites against Michigan, game 2 of the season, and then 6.5-point favorites against Missouri at the crib late in the season. So if I'm being honest, that Michigan line has me encouraged that Texas and Alabama line will probably drop as the season progresses.
Yeah, so Oklahoma's playing at home against Michigan, which means they're actually a half-point underdog here against the Wolverines.
On a neutral site, yes.
Yeah, being at home gives you 3 points. So FanDuel actually considers the Sooners a half-point underdog against the Wolverines. Now, that home environment is going to make a difference. Bryce Underwood making his first road start against the Brent Venables defense inside Gaylord Family Oklahoma Memorial Stadium. That's going to make a difference. Sooner Nation's going to show up. They're going to look to rattle the kid. They're going to try and make life a living HE double hockey sticks for Bryce Underwood, the true freshman quarterback. And yet, Oklahoma's still not getting respect, man. And I get it. They're going to have to go earn it on the field. I don't think anybody's going to give Oklahoma any respect this year until they go show something on the field. 6.5-point favorites over a Missouri team that's turning over a lot. No Luther Burden, no Drew Lock. That's a team lost a first-round offensive tackle. That's a team that turned over a lot. And you're only a 6.5-point favorite against the Tigers when you almost beat them with your garbage offense last year.
Yeah.
Come on now. Like, I'm not seeing any respect for Oklahoma. I don't see any respect for Oklahoma. 10.5-point underdogs to Texas. Are you kidding? Like, bulletin board all that, because the Sooners are going to be better than that. The Sooners are going to play these teams tougher than that. Again, this is what happens when you're coming off of a 6-7 season, when you've got a lot of turnover, when you have coaching turnover, when you have, an offensive line that was in shambles last year. People are going to have their doubts about this team. If they go out and they beat Michigan and they can do it by double digits, that'll start to earn them a little bit of respect. But until then, until maybe they go into the Red River Showdown undefeated, people aren't going to respect the Sooners.
No, not at all. And the Sooners are going to have to prove it, which we knew that. We've talked about that here numerous times. And that's one thing that we're okay with. We're okay that the Sooners need to prove themselves.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to do. Oklahoma's going to go out there and show everybody that they deserve to be considered up there. And I guess for me, I'm curious to see what those lines look like when you get to Auburn. And how does that line shift when OU plays Texas? Like, who was it? Josh Pate had talked about OU going into Texas. It was I think a fan asked the question of what is the possibility of Oklahoma walking into Red River 5-0 and Texas walking in 3-2. How does that change the dynamic of that game? And Pate agreed. He's like, as much as I would like to say that there's no way that Texas could, there's a very good chance that Texas could walk in at 3-2. How? Losing the Ohio State game to start. They're going to win everything in between. But the game right before Oklahoma, they travel to Florida and play at the Swamp. And if Lagway is healthy, because Florida is returning a lot of talent. They're considered one of the sleeper teams this year as well, along with Oklahoma because of, last season. But they've got some of the best defenses in the country right now as far as each position group. And so if they find a way to disrupt things for Texas and Ohio State or follow the Ohio State blueprint, John, there's a possibility that whenever Oklahoma and Texas matches up, Texas would have already 2 losses. Now, granted, the question's going to be from there then too. Would the odds makers switch up how they feel when it comes to the spreads once that game comes up? I guess the big question from that would be too is not only would they switch it up, but what would Oklahoma have to do to force them to switch it up?
I mean, they'd have to win against Michigan by 2 touchdowns or more and then blow the brakes off Auburn.
So double-digit wins is what you predict would have to happen to get there.
Losing in Columbus to Ohio State, losing in Gainesville to Florida, like, that's not necessarily, big upsets. You know what I mean? Like, Texas could still be considered a top 10 team with those 2 losses.
It's very fair.
I mean, if Oklahoma loses to Michigan, loses to Auburn at home, the line might balloon to 2 touchdowns against Texas. If Texas goes in 3-2, Oklahoma goes in 3-2, and those are the 4 losses between the 2 teams, that line could blow up to 2 touchdowns for Texas. Because I think everybody's going to still think highly of Texas, regardless of if they lose those 2 games, because they're against the defending national champion and everybody, one of a lot of people's preseason picks to be a dark horse candidate to contend for the playoff this year. And DJ Lagway is a good quarterback, man. So if they lose those 2 games, I don't think it'll hurt Texas as much as if Oklahoma lost their 2 games going into Red River.
That's true. And with the matchups that Oklahoma has, even though a lot of people are heavy on the Auburn train, yeah, for Oklahoma to garner any respect, they would have to win both that Michigan and that Auburn game. Then at that point, it could be just like 2023, where they're like, the Sooners seem a little bit better than we expected.
Yeah.
I just don't want Oklahoma to end up like 2022, where they start off hot, the big win in Nebraska, and you're like, oh, okay, this may be a different team, and then it falls apart. Right. I don't expect that. Yeah. Mainly because the defense is, to me, light years better than it was then. No shade against the other players. It's more of everybody
it's not
completely understands the scheme in comparison. I mean, you've got players now going into their 4th year in this scheme. So, yeah, I think the understanding of the scheme will make it to where this defense will still be stout. We just need Mateer to show up.
Yeah, it's like we've said all offseason. If the offense is at all good, above average, this team is a lot better than it was last year.
There you go.
And if they can get to Texas, the Red River Showdown, 4-1, 5-0, they'll have a chance. I mean, if they are that good, they're going to have a chance to come out of the Cotton Bowl 6-0. Some big contracts were handed out on the recruiting trail. And I know a lot of Oklahoma fans are saying, well, why aren't we spending the money? Let's take a look at that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners. Once again, thanks for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there tuning in. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. This might be a good question to ask Brent Venables and company if we get the chance at SEC Media Days that is next week in Atlanta, Georgia. We'll both be there, covering the Sooners and covering college football. So hopefully we'll get a chance to ask about these big contracts that are being handed out across college football. Jay, Felix Ojo was the one that caught everybody's attention late last week when he committed to the Texas Tech Red Raiders, reportedly signed a 3-year deal for a little over $5 million. Now it came out a little bit later that a lot of that was incentivized. So I'm sure starts, playing time, all that's going to be factored in. If he wins, conference awards, All-American awards, things like that, he'll get paid a little bit more. And then the other one that happened over the weekend was Syracuse landing a 5-star wide receiver. And I can't find
Calvin Russell.
There you go. Calvin Russell. I had the wrong text thread pulled up. Calvin Russell also getting paid a little over $4 million to go to the Syracuse Orange. Jay, what do you think of these big contracts that are being handed out right now?
It's fascinating that, one, I love that every single article that has come out around these, or let me rephrase that. I love that how every single tweet and post about these contracts have been the big number that will get everybody's attention. 3-year deals, $5.1 million, 3-year deals, $4.3 million, without the actual reading the fine details of how we get to that actual number. So the Felix Ojo deal is actually a 3-year, $775,000 a year contract, which gets you well under 5.1. But the language in the contract, because this is a revenue share contract too. This is not even NIL. This is just rev share. And what that does is that in the language, it allows for them to be able to move the value of, they have a verbal agreement to escalate that amount if there's minimal regulation around the salary cap. So if the salary cap isn't truly regulated, in which we don't expect the NCAA to do their actual job in that, or Deloitte or whoever they have out there looking at NIL deals, we don't expect none of this stuff to actually be regulated. Because of that, they're going to be able to exceed that number and push it up to 5.1. So it's a chance of it getting to 5.1, but it doesn't mean that he's going to actually make that kind of money. They're also pushing a similar deal to 2027 five-star offensive lineman Cooper Hatchett out of Fort Gibson, Oklahoma. So another OK prep that's going to end up leaving the state because they're throwing all of these absurd amount of money at him. Guess what? That's really the only guys they're doing that for. We're not seeing them do this for a whole bunch of dudes. They did this with Micah Hudson a couple years ago. Kid transferred out and transferred back in. What a dramatic situation, right? You're seeing schools like Syracuse and Texas Tech really, they're throwing a Hail Mary in these situations. And I know Oklahoma Sooner fans are asking the question, will Oklahoma do something like that? We got Michael Fasusi. So, yeah, we're going to do that, but it's going to have to make sense. We're not going to just do it frivolously for a player if we don't feel like they're one that's worth it. You might think Felix Ojo's worth it as a fan. I watch videos of Jake Krell cook them, and it made me feel like I don't think that he'd be worth that. Now, if he goes out there and shows up and shows out, then you can't question what Texas Tech did there. But they did that same thing with Kennedy, the pitcher in softball. They're going out there to make a statement, to get their name out there, to get their brand out there, to even get their donors to understand, hey, jump in the game because we're going to get name recognition with this and hope that long-term they get something out of it. But, John, I think the one thing that we have to recognize here and see is this is a revenue share contract. This is all within the rev share. So with them giving him just under, giving him $750,000 out of the $18 million that they're going to be paying out, they're going to have to find value in all those other positions. Mm-hmm. How does that look for their roster going forward?
If you're going to pay anybody, offensive tackle is certainly who you're going to pay.
Exactly.
If you're going to, and if you're Syracuse, if you're going to pay somebody, wide receiver is one of those positions that makes a lot of sense to pay. It's part of that money five. If you haven't heard that language before, it comes from the NFL ranks. You pay the five most important positions on the football field. That's quarterback, wide receiver, cornerback, defensive end, and offensive tackle. Basically, everybody that is involved in the passing game.
Yeah.
The most important positions involved in the passing game. Will Oklahoma follow that same model? That'd be a great question for Jim Nagy. Coming from the NFL ranks, having a lot of experience with the NFL, is that something he ascribes to as the money five? You could throw defensive tackle into that at the collegiate level. You can throw running back into that at the collegiate level because they still hold a lot of value because you can only find so many like truly great ones. Back to this, like so much of what Oklahoma's going to do when it comes to rev share, NIL, paying players, a lot of it's going to have to do with the right person, not just the best player, a great player. It's going to be the right people. It's going to be guys that are truly culture fits that aren't going to be coming back to the table like a Nico Iamaleava after 1 year and say, hey, I want more. They're not going to be guys that you have to worry about necessarily holding out. Guys that you're going to have to worry about bolting for the next transfer portal opportunity. They're going to look for the right guys. And I know we just want the best guys. Totally get that. At the same time, how much do you want your program dealing with renegotiations all the time? And thankfully, the coaching staff isn't going to have to be a part of that anymore because you have a general manager and a front office staff that's going to handle all those contract negotiations. But some of that stuff, man, those locker room cancers are a real thing in professional sports. How much more will they impact a collegiate locker room?
And that's what we're about to find out. And I think that a lot of us fans, I'm including myself as all of us, as fans and viewers of the game, that we have a tendency of missing the forest for the trees.
Yeah.
So we're seeing everything right in front of us, and we just want to lose our minds behind it. Like, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we doing that? I want more. Give me more. I want cake now. All of that stuff comes out of us in a situation where this is not something that's a day, like a instant fix. I put it to you this way. You don't want a bunch of freshmen playing on your roster day one. You don't. You want those players to get a couple of years in, and then you have a bunch of juniors playing together. Then you'd be excited. But for today, This is the one thing when it comes to the recruiting philosophy where I expect Oklahoma to spend a whole bunch of money in comparison to going after high schoolers, transfer portal. That's why you have Jim Nagy. That's why you have Lake Dawson. You have those guys that will find, I put it this way. When Jim Nagy finds you a Jared Verse, when Jim Nagy finds you a Trey Harris. Now, if you don't know, Trey Harris was at Louisiana Tech, went to Ole Miss, was one of the biggest wide receiver threats in the SEC when he was healthy last year. When they find you dudes like that, a Verse, a Trey Harris, someone that comes out of nowhere and just dominates, then you will all be quiet about it. Then you're going to be like, oh, okay, I see what they're doing. We wanted Trey Harris when he was in the portal because you saw the talent there. And then he went out there for 2 years and was cooking over there at Ole Miss. Mm-hmm. That's what you want. And I 100% expect Jim Nagy to do that for us here. Just as I stated last segment, do not forget, where do you think Jaydn Ott came from? Wasn't from the eyes of this staff, and it's nothing against this staff not seeing it. It's more so this staff they sometimes are also missing the forest for the trees because they're looking at what's right there in front of them when they're looking for certain players. This staff has been scouting all of the big name players and the players they feel like will be breakouts for a while. That was the job of the Senior Bowl, is finding players that are underappreciated and completely overlooked, or for the most part overlooked, either one of the two. Get them that national attention in this bowl game, get them drafted a lot higher than they would have if they didn't have the exposure. That's what the staff's going to find for us. Yeah. So keep that in mind when you complain about how the high school recruiting is going. I promise you, when you get players like a Jaydn Ott, you recognize, oh, you're playing a different type of game, and that's going to be it. I talked about it in the episode last week, John. I can see us having a 50-50 split of transfers and high school players playing on a regular basis. Why? Because it only makes sense to go after dudes that you've seen produce already.
We're going to have to discuss that maybe on tomorrow's show a little bit, because I was listening to all those shows last week and a lot of great stuff from Jay. I certainly have my own thoughts on some of that as well. And I think it'd be a good little back and forth to kind of rehash and recap some of what you discussed. I'm not going to fight with Jay. We're not going to do that.
We're going to fight. We're totally going to fight.
Island
violence.
I'm positive vibes only. Like it's island vibes over here on Locked On Sooners. But no, we'll have to discuss that, because I think it is a good ongoing discussion, because as Jim Nagy's time at Oklahoma lengthens, we're going to see this plan and the strategy unfurl and unveil itself even more. And we'll get a little bit more insight into that, but we'll continue to talk Oklahoma recruiting strategy on this week's show. And we'll have, some recruiting decisions coming up in the next week as well that are going to be pretty impactful. Where does Oklahoma stand in some of those? We'll discuss as well. And we're like less than a month from fall camp. So like things are heating up. The 2025 college football season will be here before we know it. So thank you so much for being a part of Locked On Sooners, tuning in every single day. And thank you for downloading the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Make sure you go follow Jay at Unfair Sports. Go check out his channel, Unfair Sports, over on YouTube. You can follow me at John9Williams. You can read my work covering the Sooners over at SoonersWire.com. The show is at Locked On Sooners on all of your favorite social media platforms. And for your second listen, go check out The Portal Show. Brian Smith has the latest rumors, portal entries, and signings. That's another thing, man. We got to potentially discuss who could be some of these like late portal additions with the brief portal window that's going to be right before the season. You saw that note where they?
Yeah, I saw that. That's the one thing they're working on. So let's see what that's going to look like. We might have to chop that up and discuss who might be a late portal entry that might affect Oklahoma. But yeah, go check out The Portal Show with Brian Smith, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. But until next time, he's Jay, I'm John, Boomer Sooner.